So an interesting one I spotted this week, an article in The Spectator about the quiet truth about two-parent families. It's by a really good author, by Christina O'Donnell, who said, imagine a key that opened the door to a place where children did better at school, were less likely to be dependent on drink or drugs, less likely to run into trouble with the police, and ended up with a better job. Now imagine that key being jealously guarded by a group of well-heeled families. They hold on to it tightly, this elite, but never admit to doing so. Any mention of the key in public, they roll their eyes and shrug their shoulders. It's nothing special. The key to improving lives is marriage, an institution that few dare defend, says this article. There's a book about it called The Two-Parent Priviledge, How Americans Stopped Getting Married and Started Falling Behind. It's apparently shocking America's liberals by making number-crunching case for marriage. I mean, this is very, very interesting because marriage is obviously an institution that some see as outdated, some see as incredibly important to our society, the foundation for many good lives, many good ideas of parenting. But it's very, very interesting in terms of the idea of marriage and also two parents bringing up children and what happens there. Now, Matthew Hulbert is a Liberal Democrat activist, and we'll talk in a second to Talya Ressell, who is a psychotherapist, who is a specialist in paediatric psychotherapy as well. But Matthew, let me start with you, and thank you for joining us this morning, Matthew. What do you think about this article, about this whole idea that two-parent families, people married to one another, bring up better children? I mean, there is evidence to say that the argument is there, being raised by two biological parents in this country. 83% of UK couples whose earnings are in the top quintile get married, but only 55% of couples in the bottom quintile do. This hugely increases the likelihood of children in the poorest families experiencing family breakdown. What do you make of some of these statistics?
Well, good morning, Peter, and good morning to your viewers and listeners. It was an interesting article to read, and I agreed with some parts of it. And other parts I very much disagreed with. I mean, I think of my own situation. I was raised by two parents until I was 11. My dad then found someone else that he decided that he loved, and after that I was raised by my mum. Now, did that mean a period of instability? Yeah, of course it absolutely did. What was it painful for my mum and for me at home? Yeah, it absolutely was. But after that period of uncertainty, I certainly feel that there were certainly less arguments at home, to be honest with you, and that actually the situation was much more stable after my dad had left.
That's your experience, certainly, Matthew, and you draw, understandably draw on that, and I totally understand that. And I've heard that before from friends who say, parents were bickering the whole time, one left, and then things just got, you were able to realise that great line in Mrs. Doubtfire, where Mrs. Doubtfire says, just because your parents don't love one another anymore doesn't mean they don't love you, which was just a great line. But the two-parent privilege, this idea of a longer-term impact, better mental health, higher educational attainment, higher incomes, higher status jobs. The statistics are there. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the way you were brought up. Obviously, you're a well-adjusted, lovely person. But certainly, in terms of society and the wider statistics, the evidence seems to be there, Matthew.
What I'd say is that it takes a village to raise a child. And what amazed me about Christina O'Donnell's article was there was not one word of it, not one mention of the fact about the decimation of our communities. So you think village, you think community, over the past 13 years, and the impact that has had, especially on many poorer families in this country. I mean, let me just give you've quoted me a couple of statistics. Let me quote you a couple,
sure,
Peter. According to a 2019 report, almost 800 libraries have closed in Britain since 2010. Also since 2010, 760 youth centres have closed, and more than 4,500 youth work jobs have been lost. And also since 2010, and you might think what happened in 2010, I think we all know what happened in 2010. The policy of austerity has led to the closure of 1,416 Sure Start children's centres. Now, do we not think that these things might also have an impact on the outcomes of the children of less well-off families?
Let's talk to Talya Ressell, who is a psychotherapist. One of her specialities is dealing with children, paediatrics. Talya, this is an interesting article, I thought, an interesting study. Matthew talks about the community aspect of this, but having two parents who love one another, we can maybe talk about marriage as a separate issue. I personally am a bit more agnostic about marriage as a concept, although I had two parents who are still married to one another after over half a century and did a pretty good job, even with me as their child. But Talya, what do you make of what is said here about the kind of the privilege, the idea, the things that can be certainly the quiet truth we're told about two-parent families and the advantages of that?
Well, I mean, I agree with your speaker, Matthew, around it, taking a community. I think it highlights just how hard parenting is, and that shared load obviously is going to come out with huge benefits for the child. To have two parents that can work together, support each other, provide additional time, resources, it's inevitable that that's going to really benefit a child's well-being. Do I agree?
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, it doesn't necessarily, like you said, marriage separate, doesn't necessarily have to involve marriage, but we have gotten to a state where people are isolated more than ever. So they really are struggling to parent on their own with all the additional challenges that come with it. So having two people, whether it's two parents, that would be your ideal, but you still can bring in family members or good support structures to help raise the children. That's also going to lead to some of those benefits. What
about male and female role models? Because often when people are in single parent families, it's the woman, the mother, who brings up the child. And Talya, in this article, it says at 5 months, if a child has an engaged father, at 5 months they enjoy greater cognitive development than a child whose father is absent. As a toddler, they will be better off at problem solving, and in 3 years they will boast a higher IQ. That's interesting evidence there as well, isn't it, Talya?
Absolutely, and it's not surprising to us. The ideal would be to have two actively involved parents. We know the benefits of that. I think the question that this article should be raising for us is, how do we support parents more to be actively involved, to be able to
should they stay together even if for the sake of the children? I know some couples, in my own experience, there are bound to be people out there listening who are thinking, well, actually, yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in my marriage for the sake of the children. Is that a reason to stay together? Should they do that?
Well, I think they should look very clearly at why they're staying together and what it looks like them being together. So if it's a family where there's conflict, I don't encourage that for the children. You rather want a calm, stable environment. If that means that the parents have to separate, well, as long as that can be done in a supportive, structured way, that the children don't lose access to two parents. You can have two-parent families in two different households.
Absolutely. Matthew, what do you make of what Talya has said?
I agree with a lot of what she has said. I mean, another point that I wanted to make about the original article was that it also referenced, biological parents. And a Tory MP has also done that this week on one of your sister networks. And that made me think, I'm a gay man. What does that mean for me and a potential future partner? Does that mean that, number one, our relationship is less legitimate? Does that mean that if we wanted to have children, our parentage is less legitimate? I mean, I just think, to be honest, Peter, that kind of part of it is illiberal nonsense, in my view.
In terms of how people bring up children, I'm totally with you, Matthew, in the thought that, there are 80,000 children in the care system in this country. All they need is one adult who loves them and wants to look after them. And that is far better than being brought up in the care system, especially in a children's home, although there are some very, very good children's homes in this country. And actually, families do come in all shapes and sizes, don't they, Matthew?
They absolutely do, and I think of families that I know where the grandparents raise the children, and that is absolutely legitimate. And special credit to them because they've already raised their children, and due to whatever circumstance it may be, they're now having to raise their grandchildren as well. Now, I've got to say that I think of my sister and brother-in-law still very much together, the best couple I know, in actual fact, two wonderful people who have raised three wonderful children. I'm not against the concept of marriage. What I am saying is, indeed, I fought for equal marriage, for gay marriage, so of course I'm not against the concept of marriage. But I agree with you, Peter. I think, families come in all shapes and sizes, and I don't think it's for people to lecture, for example, single-parent families, that they're somehow less legitimate and somehow doing a worse job. I think it goes back to what I was saying earlier on about the fact that we've lost community in this country, and that is the real issue here.
Thanks very much indeed, both to Matthew and to Talya there. Matthew Hulbert, Lib Dem activist, and Talya Ressell, who is a psychotherapist. One of her specialities is paediatrics, so very, very interesting there.